All right. So I think we've got most of the numbers we were anticipating. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here early at the start of our first webinar. So hopefully this doesn't crash and burn. We're testing this technology out. And so far we like what we see. We like the ability to offer this class in sort of a different format. Hopefully it's more convenient for you to be able to attend from wherever you're at and at a time that might be more convenient for you as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. I will make my introduction. I am Kevin Norville. I am the director of the South Central Small Business Development Center. I'm located in London, actually coming to you today from Corbin. And my partner over in Somerset, Jim Reams, is going to be in the chat room today. So Jim is going to be addressing your questions. So feel free, if you have those questions, just pop those into the chat room. If it's a topic that we're not going to be able to hit, maybe Jim can be able to answer that for you. So without any further ado, I don't see any questions that are pending right now. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, I'm with the South Central Small Business Development Center. Just a little bit about us and what we do. We are your free resource. I say free, but technically your tax dollars have already paid for it. So it's not free. But we are a resource for anyone looking to start or grow a business. So if you are in the startup stage and you're considering starting a business, this is a great class to attend. We're going to cover a lot of topics in a very short amount of time, but I encourage you all to follow up with us after this class, because if there's questions we don't have time to address, or if you have situations that are a little bit more specific to you, we welcome the opportunity to work with you on those one-on-one. So let's go ahead and get started. And to start things off, I'm actually going to begin by sharing just a short video that I found, because I really believe that some of the advice that is provided here is much better than anything I could tell you. So we'll take just a couple of minutes here and watch this very short video, and I'll be right back.
The best advice to a small business owner, or for that matter, to a large business owner, is never stop thinking about how to delight your customer. Not to satisfy your customer, but to delight your customer. And when you wake up in the morning, start thinking about it. During the day, think about it. At night, think about it, and then dream about it. And no company's ever failed that had millions of delighted customers. And you start with them and you get them one at a time.
There's no substitute for hard work. The best time you're ever going to have is when it starts out just you, and it'd be great if it grows into a wonderful, big, profitable company. But you're never going to be happier and more satisfied than you are in the first year or so of getting your business going, because you do every single thing. You sweep up when everybody goes home. You're the first one in. You plug in the coffee pot, so when your people come in, they have hot coffee and can get straight to work. You work through lunch, set an example for them, but there's no substitute for hard work. People say luck, yes, but the harder you work, the luckier you get.
My advice to a small business owner or any entrepreneur would be not to be discouraged if the business you end up with is not the one you started out to pursue, because so often you encounter difficulties, you encounter failures, and the important piece is to learn from each of those very quickly and to pivot and to move on to the idea that works.
Of course, you have to be close to your products, close to your customers, and think about them. That's the most important, but don't forget to think about your business, what your plans are, what you want to do next, how to take your business to the next level. Again, think about being in your business, but think about your business as well.
My best advice is to really work hard to clarify what your purpose is, and be able to articulate that, be able to communicate it in a simple sentence. And the reason that's important is, as you bring people into your company, I think the most important question you ask them is, why are you here? Why do you want to join this company? And if you hear that purpose back, if you hear that passion around that purpose, it makes everything a whole lot easier. Any skill can be learned and taught, but passion cannot.
Being an entrepreneur can be a roller coaster ride at times. You will have great days, you will have not so great days. You may even from time to time have an awful day. You've got to stay focused and stay level-headed and keep your feet on the ground.
companies that do well at some level, even though it may not be written down on a piece of paper, need to have kind of a clear strategy of why they're different, why they're adding value, why they're producing something special that customers need and that they're not getting now. So I think if there's a clear sense of strategy and you can get all the people aligned around that, then you get a lot more power than if you're just scrambling and working harder and harder and without that clear direction. So that's my one piece of advice.
All right. So great video there. I love how the one gentleman said, you know, you have to be present in your business. You have to be working with customers, but you also have to take time to work on your business. And that's something that we see in a lot of instances with folks who get their business up and running, that they're so involved and so driven to make everything work that oftentimes they don't take that time to step back and work on the business. With you all being at the startup stage, I commend you and thank you for being here today, because you're working on your business even before it gets started. And so with that, we're going to try and go through as many things as we can today to really cover the nuts and bolts, the high level overview of what's involved in starting a business in Kentucky. So we're going to fly through some of these slides. So forgive me if we go too quick. I will share the slide deck with you afterwards, and we've got some handouts to share with you as well. So just as long as we've got your email address, we'll be able to get that to you. So as I mentioned, we're part of the Small Business Development Center network in Kentucky. That means there are 12 centers located throughout the state of Kentucky that do the same thing that we do. And what we do is we provide high quality, hands-on, in-depth consulting services to Kentucky businesses and potential entrepreneurs. We're a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration as well as Kentucky Institutes of Higher Education. So our centers throughout Kentucky are normally, in most cases, housed at a university setting. We're Kentucky's only nationally accredited business development program. That's a big thing for us. We like to make sure people are aware of that. There's accreditation standards that we have to meet on an ongoing basis. And then in addition to that, our economic impact is actually validated annually by a third party. So we like to talk a little bit about, you know, who we are, just because we find a lot of folks aren't that familiar with us as the SBDC. So that gives you a little bit of our background. Now, as far as what we're going to cover today, I'm hoping to hit on all 6 of these topics. Again, I'm going to be respectful of your time. I realize many of y'all may be at work on your lunch break. So we're going to fly through some of these at probably a higher level than you might be comfortable with. But again, feel free to follow up with us later. We're going to start with talking about feasibility. So when people come to the SBDC and ask, well, do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea? We try to reframe that question and say, well, let's look at the feasibility of the idea. So that's the first thing we're going to dive into. Then we're going to talk about legal entity options, registering your business, and licensing and permits. Those 2 things right now kind of go hand in hand. Then we're going to finish with an overview of a business plan, sort of the reasons for business planning in general, but also some specific things that you need to include in your plan and the purpose of creating a business plan. And then again, hopefully we're going to address some of your questions as well. So having said that, let's dive right in. Is my business idea feasible? When we talk about feasibility, we're going to talk about it sort of looking at it through different lenses, if you will. And we're going to start with any personal considerations that you should take into account when you're thinking about starting a business. Then we're going to look at the market considerations that you need to be comfortable with. And then finally move on to financial considerations, ultimately leading us to a decision, hopefully a more informed decision, about whether or not this business idea seems feasible and if it should be something that we should move forward with, or maybe we need to go back to the chalkboard and start over. So to start off with personal considerations, I want to emphasize that these are personal. So many of these are going to be maybe not applicable to you in the exact same way I've presented the examples here, but try to think of this in terms of what are those personal considerations that you need to address in regards to starting a business. The first one we list here is temperament and personality. You know, studies are revealing more and more that your personality characteristics actually play a large role in how successful your business is going to be. So that's one of the first things we really encourage folks to ask themselves. Are you suited to small business ownership? And really, what are those types of things we're looking about? Well, are you extroverted or introverted? It's not to say that one is right and one is wrong, but you may need to be aware that you might have to address a specific issue in order to have a greater degree of business success. Are you the person who likes to be in charge? Are you comfortable making decisions? Those are the types of personality characteristics that we're talking about. The next thing we look at are risk, and specifically, what is your tolerance level for risk? If you're a recent graduate out of college, you're not married, you don't have a house payment, you don't have kids, your risk tolerance may be much higher than those of us who are a little bit older and who have a mortgage and kids just getting braces and one getting ready to go off to college and those types of things. So you need to be aware of at least what is your tolerance level for risk, because when you start a business, there is a certain amount of risk involved. Lifestyle considerations is the next area we're going to consider. And by that, I mean, if you're the type of person who really wants to spend the weekend on the lake, starting a bakery where you have to be up at 4 a.m. to make the donuts is probably not going to be compatible with what you would like to be doing on the weekend. So does your business concept match your lifestyle? As we look at a few more of these, work ethic and passion, I tie those two together. Some people separate them, but really it's that passion that's going to carry you through those difficult days. If you're passionate about this idea and passionate about making your business a success, you're going to be willing to work those 12 to 16-hour days. You know, my dad gave the example. He said a successful business person really shouldn't have to work more than half a day. And it's up to you to decide, do you want to work the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours? Going into the next consideration of family, is your family on board with this decision? Because if they're not, that's going to add some stress to you that you really don't need as you're looking to start this business. So make sure your family's on board and supportive of what you're looking to do. And then finally, when we look at money, we say that's a personal consideration, but really only in the sense that I hope that you're prepared that money's not the only reason you're starting this business, right? Your passion and your interest and your desire to do something on your own because of these other factors weigh more heavily than just making more money. But on the flip side of that, are you prepared to lower your standard of living for maybe months or potentially even years until the business starts to take off, where you can really be rewarded for all of your effort? So those are kind of the personal considerations. And again, keep in mind, those may not apply directly to you, but hopefully some of them do. And so as you start to think about your business idea, sort of run it through that filter of personal considerations. Next, we're going to look at the market considerations, and we often call this market research. Does demand exist for what it is that you want to do with your business? And really the only way you can answer that up front without being in business is to do your research. So we're going to help you try to figure out the ways in which you can research your market. Market research, I kind of like this definition, blends consumer behavior and economic trends to confirm and improve your business idea. So look at this as a process. When you undertake market research, sure, in many cases, you're looking to validate your idea. But if the research shows something entirely different, you need to be flexible with your idea to be able to improve it along the way. So how are you going to do this market research? There's really two ways. You can go direct to the customer, which is called primary market research, or you can use existing published material, which we call secondary market research. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those. Primary data or primary market research is really you talking to people in your market. Okay. So but it's also using what personal experiences you already have. So if you've been working for a business that's similar to what you're wanting to start, you obviously know something about the market for that potential business. So you're able to review those personal experiences. Second, you can conduct personal interviews. Talk to your contacts that are in the industry. They're going to be able to give you insight into the day-to-day and what's happening trend-wise and nationally, but more important, locally in that particular industry. Survey potential customers. That can get expensive and time-consuming. Certainly any of these can. But it's a good idea to talk to some potential customers and get their feel for, well, would they be willing to do business with you if you were to open in this area? Observe and research your competitors. Look, there's a lot of information you can glean just by looking at who's already in the market that you're going to be competing against. Make a list of their strengths and weaknesses. Get to know how they do business because you're going to be competing with them on a day-to-day basis. Talk to similar businesses in other markets. So this is a good example. If you are opening, let's say, a bakery, you might not be able to talk to another local bakery because they're going to be your competitor, but you can talk to a bakery, let's say, in another city. Maybe you go on vacation and you find a bakery there that you really like. Sit down and talk to the business owner and ask them all these questions that you have about your business and what you want to do. Get their input. Those types of things are going to go a long way. And then talk to other suppliers and vendors. They're going to be a great source of primary market research for you. So some of the questions, again, that you're looking to ask, how many competitors exist in your market? What are their strengths and weaknesses? How successful are they? And then ultimately, is there enough potential customers willing to spend enough money on your product or service to provide sales revenue that covers your expenses and hopefully earns you a profit? Now, secondary market research is all of that data that exists that's already been done by someone else. So a large part of this is accessible. Actually, you can find a lot on the internet for sure, but you can find even more by going to a local public library or perhaps a university library. These are tremendous assets that we have in our communities that most people aren't even aware of. They're going to give you access to market studies, databases that you would have to pay a tremendous amount of money for if you were trying to access that on your own. You're going to be able to see things like industry information from trade associations. There's all sorts of databases that they have access to that really most people aren't aware of. A couple others here that I give examples of. When you're talking about trends and statistics, the Census Business Builder is a great resource for information about your local market. You can go there and actually map out customers, competition, what the market looks like, average per capita income, education attainment level. You can actually look at all of those variables for your specific market. And then the organization at UK, which actually we're a part of, is called SEDIC. It's in the UK College of Agriculture. They produce an annual county profile, which is a great resource to go pull those county profiles on the counties that you serve to look at all this different demographic and socioeconomic data that exists in those counties. One of the resources that the SBDC brings to the table when we work with you one-on-one is access to a database called IBIS World. This is a great source of market research. I love how it summarizes a lot of their findings into real actionable insights. So in this example here that you're seeing on the screen, it's for coffee shops in the United States. I just wanted to show you a couple of screenshots as to what this report kind of will help you understand. It's a little bit hard to read here, but you sort of see an industry at a glance, sort of where the revenue is, where the profit is, what the annual growth has been for the last 5 years, what they're projecting that growth to be for the next 5 years, how many businesses are in this particular industry. Just a tremendous amount of information that's available to you. And again, this is all free through the SBDC. I love this particular page. It talks about key success factors for businesses in the coffee shop industry. And it summarizes them for you and tells you, look, we look at a lot of different success factors, but here are some very important ones for this particular industry. So market research is a key piece of determining the overall feasibility of your business idea, and it's one you don't want to shortchange yourself on. Certainly, you're going to rely a tremendous amount on your gut instinct about whether or not this business is going to work, but make sure you back that up and validate it, and then improve your idea with your market research findings. So now we're going to shift to the third lens that we're going to look at feasibility with, and that's the financial considerations. And through financial considerations, obviously, we're going to use projections to decide if the business is financially feasible. I like to tell clients to begin with their cost structure so that when a client comes to me and they really don't know if this is a business that they can make happen or not, we start by looking at what their estimated cost would be. So I have them oftentimes, list all of your startup expenses. What do you need to purchase or what do you need to secure in order so that you can start business? That may include things like equipment or inventory, supplies. They may have to pay a deposit down on their utilities. They're going to need computers and software and things like that. Then I ask them to prepare a separate list of what are your ongoing monthly expenses going to look like. And those obviously are going to be things like your rent and your utilities and payroll and stuff. Once we have those, then we start to look at revenue side. When we look at the side of your business that we're talking about for revenue, we want to be extremely conservative in our projections. Even though we said talk to customers and ask them if they're going to do business with you if you open, I put here, don't count on promises. I want to make sure you understand why I mean it that way. Don't bank on those promises, maybe is a better way of saying it, because it's very easy for a customer to say yes to a hypothetical situation than to change their actual behavior. And if you think about it, even ask yourself, how often do you actually patronize a new business? Or do you continue doing businesses that are very familiar with you or that you're very familiar with? Whether that's restaurants might be a little bit different. Everybody kind of likes to experience a new restaurant. but think about other service businesses. How often do you change your barber? How often do you change your insurance company or your accounting service? So understand that when you talk to people, they may say they're going to do business with you, but it's hard to count on those 100% of the time. The next thing we want to talk about is really be conservative in your projections of revenue. We don't want high pie in the sky estimates of what you think the sales will be. So be conservative. That's the number one thing to know about revenue projections, is make sure those estimates are conservative. And we will oftentimes work with clients to develop a range of sales estimates. And maybe even we'll run 2, 3, 4 different scenarios just to say, okay, well, this is what we think is most likely. This is very optimistic, and this would be very, very conservative or pessimistic. So just consider all of those things as you start to develop your financial projections. And then what are we going to do with that data? Well, we're going to take it and list it out. So in here, when we say, here's what we're going to need to start this business, we've listed things like equipment, some additional startup expenses, inventory, working capital, which brings us to a total cash requirement of $120,000. Now, I want to emphasize here too, don't forget working capital. That's the one area that's most often overlooked or at least underestimated, because a lot of times entrepreneurs will start and say, well, if I just get this equipment, I'll be ready to get up and running on day one, and I won't have any issues beyond that. Working capital helps you during those lean times. Maybe the customers don't come in on day one. Maybe it's day 31 before you see your first customer, or maybe your payments don't come through as quickly as you had anticipated. That working capital will help you get to that point, so that you're not, it's going to help you through those lean times so that you're not really struggling to keep the doors open. So $120,000 is our total financial need for this particular business. Where's that money going to come from? Well, at best, you should be aware that a bank will only loan you 80% of a total project. So they're going to expect you to invest at least 20% into your own business. As many of them, they may not come out and say directly to you, but if you were on their side of the table, would you be willing to invest in someone who wasn't willing to invest in themselves? And so in this case, be prepared as you look at starting this business and thinking about how much money it's going to take. Do you have about that 20% to invest in the business yourself? So now as we come to this ultimate review here of the financial considerations, we want to know, does it look like the business is going to make money? So I talked about the expenses, and we want to break it down a little bit further here to talk about the difference between fixed expenses, which are those that don't vary with any level of sales. They're the same every month, right? Your rent, your manager's salary, the utilities, insurance, your loan payment, and all those other operating expenses. And then separate those from your variable expenses. Variable expenses are those that are directly related to sales. It includes things like your raw materials or your purchases that are going to be sold, as well as direct labor. And then we're going to perform a break-even analysis. We want to know at what point of sales do we officially break even, right? So that then everything after that becomes profit. So the formula we're going to use, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, I just want to give you the example. Fixed costs divided by the contribution margin, which in this case is identified as the average price per unit minus the average cost per unit. So what does that look like in a real example? Say you're a jewelry store. You're turning this jewelry making hobby into an actual business. You've got $1,000 per month of fixed costs, rent, utilities, equipment. Your variable costs for each necklace, we're just going to say you have one product, are $50 for materials and labor. Now you'd like to charge about $70 for each necklace, since that's what similar pieces are selling for online. So if we run this analysis, we're going to see your break-even quantity is you take $1,000 of your fixed cost divided by the 70 minus 50 to get your contribution margin. So divided by 20 means you got to sell at least 50 necklaces a month at $70 in order to break even. Anything below that, you're losing money. Anything above that, you're profiting. Okay. So a real simple example, but we'll run several break-even analysis scenarios with you when we sit down and talk to you one-on-one. So you know that you're going to need $120,000. You're going to have to put in the $24,000 yourself, the 20%. So where's that money going to come from? Well, obviously, your first source is going to be personal resources. What do you have in savings that you can invest into yourself, into getting this business started? The second resource we have listed here are family and friends. Look, lots of businesses start with people going to their family and friends and asking them to invest in the business. It's very common. Obviously, third here, we have listed banks and other financial institutions. The nonprofit economic development organizations, I want to sit there for just one moment if I can. We're really blessed in Kentucky to have an abundance of lenders, and especially in the South Central area where my service area is located. We have 3 nonprofit economic development organizations. We have in Somerset, it's called Southeast Kentucky Economic Development. We call them SCED for short. Everybody has an acronym, right? SBDC, SCED, you're going to hear all sorts of acronyms. In London, we have Kentucky Highlands Investment Corporation, KHIC, Kentucky Highlands. And then in Berea, we have the Mountain Association for Community and Economic Development, called those MACID. So each of these organizations will lend money to people looking to start a business. Now, they're not intended to be a primary lender. They really see themselves as being, those that if you go to the bank and the bank's not willing to loan you the money, they're a secondary source of capital. And many times they'll partner with a bank. So if the bank says, well, I'm willing to loan 50,000 of this deal, they may come in and participate at the other 50,000. So it's a great resource to know about. And obviously one of the services we provide is access to capital, meaning that we help you get access to capital. Unfortunately, we don't have capital ourselves, but we help you get access to capital. There are alternative lenders online. I'm sure you all have already seen those. You see ads popping up all the time for those. Crowdfunding is a real popular way to get funded now to start your business. There's all sorts of interesting concepts around crowdfunding. It's not a fit for every business, but those that it is a fit for, it can work really well. And then also don't forget, some businesses are a better fit for this as well. Equity investments through either angel investors or venture capitalists. If your business is the right model and if it fits the right need or the right program that you're looking for with an angel investor or venture capitalist, you might be able to get others to invest in your business. So we've gone this far in and we've not yet, or at least I've not seen a question about grants. Jim, you might be able to see some if there's anything. But the grant question is by far the most frequently asked question that we receive. And it goes back several years ago. There was these horrible infomercials that ran on TV. I'm sure you remember the guy with the suit, looked like the Joker. He had the question marks all over and he would go dancing around Washington, D.C. It was horrible. So anyway, but those questions all relate to grants. The sad news is that really the SBA does not have a grant program to help you start your business. Now, I used to say that there are no grant programs to help you start the business. Now, I think the reality is you just have to be aware that there are very, very few, and those few that do exist are very specific. So you would have to have a very specific business that met the requirements of a particular grant program to be eligible for that. Ultimately, though, we do emphasize that grants are ultimately not the main way to finance any business. It's just not out there. Okay. So that helps us to get to the point of feasibility. So now we've looked at everything from a personal consideration, market considerations, and financial considerations. Now, hopefully, we've validated our business idea. We feel comfortable going forward with it. What do we need to do to get selected to select a proper legal entity? This is the part where I provide a disclaimer that I am not an attorney nor am I a CPA, so I cannot give legal or tax accounting advice. However, what we're going to share with you today are just some of the differences between these legal entities and talk about some of the pros and cons of each. So the main types of entities that most of our clients select are listed here. You have sole proprietor, partnership, C corporation, S corporation, and limited liability company. So just to talk a little bit about these and sort of what they mean, sole proprietors are the easiest to form. You can be up and running very quickly. There's really not a cost associated with it. It's defined as a business with one owner, right? So that's kind of the sole issue. There's no legal distinction here between the business and the person, the business and the owner. So there's no liability protection there, right? So if you were get involved in a lawsuit and someone sues the business, they are suing you. Therefore, there's the maximum risk exposure to the owner for potential liabilities with the sole proprietorship. Income is passed through to your personal tax return. So you don't have to, the sole proprietor doesn't file taxes, it's the person. and sole proprietorships dissolve upon the death of an owner. Again, sole proprietors, really easy to start, so there's not much involved to them. Partnerships are kind of like a sole proprietorship, except it's 2 or more people. So they're very easy to form. In a general partnership, all of the partners share the liability. In a limited partnership, the liability of the partners is limited to the extent of their investment. So if a partner is 1/3 a partner, then that means they've invested 1/3 of the amount that the other partner has. They're only liable for 1/3 of the total debts, or in this case, liability exposure. Partnerships as well are dissolved upon the death of one of the partners or departure of the partner. A written partnership agreement is recommended, it's not required, but it is recommended. And as the bottom line here, all partners are liable for each partner's actions with or without consent. So sole proprietorships and partnerships, we see a lot of businesses start that way, but oftentimes they won't remain that way. They may start that way quickly and think, well, I'm going to use this as a hobby and see how it goes. But then eventually they'll convert to one of these other entities we're going to talk about. So corporations, you've heard about corporations. There's 2 types we're going to talk about today: C corporations and S corporations. Both are separate legal entities. Both require articles of incorporation to be drafted. As we look at the C Corp and some of the things that make it different, it can be owned by a single person or multiple people. There is limited liability provided to the investors. The downside of a C corporation is double taxation, which means the corporation itself pays taxes and you as the owner would pay taxes on any money you take from the business. You can raise capital through the sale of stock. As we look at the S corporation is really a tax designation more so than anything, but there are a few more regulations around that. It says here you'd have to file Form 2553 with the IRS. You are limited to no more than 100 shareholders with an S corporation. Every shareholder must have U.S. legal residence. The income flows to stockholders, avoiding the double taxation at the federal level. So there are some requirements with an S corporation, but you can get past the double taxation issue of a C corp by forming an S corp. And then again, there's limited liability provided to the investors. Now, as we get to the discussion of an LLC, it's probably the one that you've heard the most about. It's certainly the one that we see the most of in Kentucky. I would say 95% of my client base, when they look to form a legal entity, they choose an LLC. LLCs are easy to form. As I run down some of the lists here, you can have a single member LLC or a multiple member LLC. Again, as an owner, you're referred to as a member in the LLC nomenclature. You don't file articles of incorporation. Instead, you file articles of organization with the Secretary of State. Liability protection of a corporation. So the same liability protection, which again, just to clarify that, so that we're clear on it, that means if you're involved in a lawsuit as the business, if the business is sued, the person suing the business can only go after the assets of the business and not your personal assets. So that's one of the main reasons that people want to form a corporation or an LLC. The benefit here for the LLC over the corporation is that income is passed through to the members. Therefore, it does not pay any taxes as the LLC, just you as the individual owner or individual member. Or in the case of multiple members, you would pay that. The default tax treatment for a single member LLC is that of a sole proprietorship. You basically designate that with the IRS when you obtain your employer identification number. The default tax treatment for a multiple member LLC is a partnership. So it treats it the same way. And that's, again, a tax designation that you make at the time you file your employer identification number. So LLCs are by far the most popular. They're very easy to form. The only additional thing that you need to have that's not listed here on this slide is you do need basically an operating agreement, which just sort of outlines the steps that how you're going to do business, who's involved, who are the members of the LLC, what business are you in. And that's a document that it's best practice is really just to sign that document, get it notarized, and keep it in your files. It's not even something that you have to file with the Secretary of State. It's really just something you keep for yourself. But you do have to register your LLC. We'll talk about that here in just a second. So those are legal entity options that you have in Kentucky. Now, notice I left out a couple. I left out the Public Service Corporation and the B Corp. Those are some things that are really getting a lot of attention nowadays. Folks might want to have a social benefit tied to their business operation, and there's an option to do that now. If that's something that interests you, or if that's something you're considering, I encourage you to reach out to Jim or I, and we'd be happy to talk to you about those. But I don't include those in the regular presentation because it doesn't apply to most folks. So just to let you know, that is an option though. So our next topic here is, how do we operate legally as a business? So really what we're going to cover here is how do you register your business, which is probably the most time consuming component. So in Kentucky, they have consolidated the process and made it much simpler than it used to be by using what's called the Kentucky One-Stop Business Portal. And this One-Stop Business Portal is the one place that you go to register your business with the LLC, with the Secretary of State, and also to register for any tax accounts that you need at the state level. So this is the homepage, what it looks like. You have to create an account when you go to do this. And then when you file your LLC online, you're going to pay, I believe it's $49 is what's due at the time of the registration. But let me walk you through. I think I've got one more slide here that shows, the process. So these are the steps involved in registering your business with the Kentucky Secretary of State's office. And if you look at step 1 and 2, choose a name and structure and register your business. That's the process of actually getting everything registered with the Secretary of State. So you tell the Secretary of State what type of business you're forming, and then you tell it what name you're using. They'll do a check to make sure that name's not in use anywhere else in Kentucky. And then it'll walk you through registering the business in the state of Kentucky as an LLC. That process generally can be completed in maybe 30, 45 minutes. Around step 2, somewhere in step 2, it's going to encourage you to go to the IRS website. It's not shown here, but go to the IRS website and obtain what's called an employer identification number, the EIN. So the employer identification number is an IRS number, so that you tell the IRS that my LLC is now in existence in Kentucky. And so the IRS assigns you a number, and then you come back and you actually, you have to tell the Secretary of State what that number is as well. As you get into steps 3 through 7, you'll see that the state of Kentucky now has consolidated all of the process of registering your business and making sure it's properly licensed into one area. So steps 3 through 7 are going to take you a longer period of time. I was with a business owner the other day, and it took us about an hour and a half to get through steps 3 through 7. So just so you're aware, it's not a real quick process. There's a lot of questions that they're going to ask you. Most of them you're going to answer no. But occasionally some of those you might have to answer yes to and provide some additional details. But what that's going to do is that's going to set you up. For instance, if you're going to be retailing product in the state of Kentucky, if you're going to be selling product, you have to collect sales tax. So it's going to register you with the revenue cabinet so that you can get a sales tax number, which means that you're going to have to collect sales tax from your customers, set it in the bank, and then once a month or once a quarter, depending on your schedule, you're going to have to submit that along with a report to the revenue cabinet, all of the sales tax dollars that you collected. It's going to talk about if you're planning to hire an employee. If you are planning to hire an employee, it will set up your employer withholding responsibilities. So it will tell you, okay, you have to collect this from your employee's paycheck each 2-week period, and then on a quarterly basis, you have to report that as well. So this process of registering your business is very lengthy. And it can take longer if you have, if you're going to have employees from day one, if you're doing things like selling product, it can take, again, a few hours to complete. If you're a service-based business that doesn't have to collect sales tax, and if you don't have employees, you're going to get through it pretty quickly. But as you go through, it's going to identify other things that may be specific to your business, and it will direct you to those other areas if you need an additional license or permit involved with your business. So that is the Kentucky One-Stop website. A word of caution here. I've heard this from some of our other directors, and also just the other day talked to a client who it happened to. They started to register a legal entity in Kentucky, an LLC in their case, and they got down the road and they thought, well, I'm not real sure, but they actually got started and didn't cancel it out officially. And so what happened was that came back a year later and said, okay, this LLC was in fact in existence. And so they owe the $175. So make sure if you start a legal entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC in this case, if you change your mind, you have to take steps to actually dissolve that entity because it is a legal entity. And if not, you're going to potentially be subject to, in this case, the Kentucky Limited Liability Entity Tax. So just a word of caution there. Just be ready to move forward when you actually go to register your LLC or your business. Okay, we're making pretty good time. I realize I've been talking quick, so I do apologize, but I wanted to make sure I could get through everything we had to cover today. I'll pause for just a moment to just ask, are there any questions at this point that anyone would like addressed in regards to anything we've covered up until now? Because we're kind of getting ready to shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit more about a business plan and what that looks like. But now would be a good time. If you do have a question, just type it out there in the chat room, and either Jim or I, if I see it, we'll try to address that question for you. Okay, not seeing any at this point, so I will go ahead and we'll talk about the business plan overview. The first question we really want to deal with is, why should I even bother with a business plan, right? It seems maybe like it's an outdated concept in many cases. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. It's certainly one that I hear a lot of times, but I think the benefit of a business plan is not what is ultimately produced, meaning a hard copy of a plan that has a bunch of graphs and charts and market research and numbers in it, but rather it's the process. Because everything we've talked about here today, when we talked about the feasibility considerations, a large part of that, it really is information that goes directly into your business plan. So it's that research. I like this quote here: writing a business plan forces you into a disciplined thinking. An idea may sound great, but when you put down all the details and numbers, it may fall apart. So what are the purposes of a business plan? Here I've identified three. There's obviously more, but the three that we'll address is to raise money. It's a requirement, really, for anybody that's looking to invest in your business, whether that be a bank, a nonprofit economic development organization, or in the case of a private investor, they're still going to want to see what your business plan is, a copy of your business plan. And especially as you go to a lender and looking to get a loan, they're going to want to see a business plan that's pretty fully formed, and that also includes a pretty substantial section that talks about the financial projections that you think the business is capable of doing. That's just part of what they want to see when you apply for a loan. The other reason is it's going to help you make better and more sound business decisions, not only now before you start the business, but also as the business gets up and running. Because again, as we mentioned at the start, so often business owners, once they get the business up and running, they're really then so heavily involved in the day-to-day operations that they may not take the time to pause and say, hey, you know what? We did some projections when we started this business. I wonder how close those are to what I'm actually seeing. But it's a great way to sort of check where you're at in that business startup phase, and then to be able to make adjustments as you go forward. And that really gets at the heart of the third issue, to help you identify those potential weaknesses. Ultimately, the goal of the business plan is to help you be prepared for whatever may come. And so as you address potential issues of your business idea, you can resolve those before you actually get into business. So those are sort of the three things that we hope the process of creating a business plan helps to resolve. If we look at the format of a business plan, here's sort of our standard outline that we like to use with clients. And I'm going to let you look at that for just a moment as I take a drink of water here. I apologize. So when you look here, the first thing you'll see on the outline is an executive summary. The executive summary is usually the easiest thing to write, but it actually should be the last thing that you write, because you want to go through the process of the other areas of the business plan before you come back and summarize everything. And that's really what the summary is for, is it's a summary of everything else that's included in the plan. So that executive summary, usually we say 1 to 2 pages, but it's highlighting the major points of a business plan, including things like your management team, the size of the market, your marketing strategy, any alliances you plan to form, potential profits, the amount of money you're requesting, what you'd like to see for the payment terms for the loan. All of those things are kind of summarized so that if a banker or a potential investor looks at that executive summary, they can read that really quick and get a great idea of what the business is about and what's going to be contained in the business plan. As we go on down, you'll see then we go into the summary of the business, or the general company description. That's where you explain the business in more detail. Provide things like your mission statement, goals and objectives, the business philosophy. Describe the industry. That's where the market research is coming in. An overview of products and services that you're going to offer. What the market looks like, what competitors are out there, what experience do you have in this particular industry? Why should that be considered favorable? You're going to actually illustrate here in this section what strengths and core competencies that your business is going to have that's going to separate you from the competitors. And then you're also going to talk about what legal entity you selected. The next section is going to cover a lot more detail about products and services. So go into as much depth as you can there about how you came about with these products, the services, how you got to your pricing level, what that looks like in terms of profitability, all of those things covered there. Your marketing plan is really a plan within a plan, because a lot of times we'll work with existing businesses on creating a marketing plan. They may already have a business plan, but what they need is a marketing plan. How do I reach more new customers? So that marketing plan is really a plan unto itself, but it's inserted into the business plan. And it just takes into account the analysis of your existing market, your marketing strategy. In other words, how are you going to capture market share? How are you going to reach customers? How are you going to advertise to them? So it's not just advertising, but advertising is a component of the marketing plan. Then you're going to get into your operational details that talk about how the business is going to run, where it's going to be located, what equipment you might need, personnel, all of those things. Then you go to the management and organizational plan, talk in detail again about the strengths of the business, about job functions for key staff people, and then plans to fill any gaps in the management team. And then in the appendix, or here in section 8, depending on how you structure it, is where your financial data is going to come into play. So when you work with the SBDC, what we're going to help you produce is a complete set of financial projections. That's going to include a cash flow statement, income statement, and balance sheet for 3 years. And so we're going to prepare those documents in a way that lenders are used to seeing, in a format that they're comfortable with. And then we're going to state what are all of the assumptions that we used in preparing these estimates, both on the cost side and on the revenue side, so that anyone who looks at those numbers can very quickly identify and see exactly how we came up with those numbers and what they're based on. And then finally, if you have any supporting documents, you would include those in the appendix. If you've got contracts out there that are ready to go on day one with a potential customer, that's a great place to put that in the appendix. If you have letters of support or letters of intent from potential customers, again, good place to put that. Any research that you want to emphasize and show exactly how much it contributes to the viability of your business, it's a good place to include that as well. So in regards to business planning, the main thing I want to encourage you to understand is that it's a process, and it's a process you don't have to go through alone. We're here to help you at the SBDC in the market research, in the financial projections, in putting all of that together in a package that a lender would want to see and be receptive to receiving. So I encourage you to make use of the SBDC resources that are in your area. Reach out and contact us for a one-on-one consulting appointment where we can actually sit down and help you, establish your goals, help you identify what those look like, and then help you as you go through the step-by-step process towards achieving those goals. Do we have any questions right now? I've got one more thing I'd like to share with you. If there's any questions, I don't see any right now in the chat room, so I'm going to go ahead and do one more thing, but feel free to type it in if you do have a question. In terms of, again, I mentioned, being able to follow up with us. We will send out an email. You already have our contact information, but I'll send out an email with our direct information here so that you'll know how to reach Jim or I at the SBDC. If you're in an area of the state that we're not serving, we'll connect you with your local SBDC, and we'll make sure you get connected with someone there. But let me show you one more quick video, again, that just sort of illustrates, I think, kind of where many people are in regards to the starting a business, because it is a process, and it's a process that takes time. And this time can be, months or even years in starting a business. And so many of us, or many of you, have been thinking about this business idea for possibly years. And maybe you're just now taking steps. Maybe this is that first step that you've taken, is I said, you know what, I'm going to sit down and go through this class and see what I need to know about starting my business. Well, this is a great video. Hopefully this will inspire you and help you as you go throughout that process.
In the Far East, they have something that's called the Chinese bamboo tree. The Chinese bamboo tree takes 5 years to grow. They have to water and fertilize the ground where it is every day. And it doesn't break through the ground until the 5th year. But once it breaks through the ground, within 5 weeks, it grows 90 feet tall. Now the question is, does it grow 90 feet tall in 5 weeks or 5 years? The answer is obvious. It grows 90 feet tall in 5 years, because at any time had that person stopped watering and nurturing and fertilizing that dream, that bamboo tree would have died in the ground. And I can see people coming out talking to a guy out there watering and fertilizing the ground that's not showing anything. Hey, what you doing? You've been out here a long time, man. And the conversation in the neighborhood is, you growing a Chinese bamboo tree, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Well, even Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder can see ain't nothing showing. So how long you been working on this? How long have you been working on your dreams? And you have nothing to show. This is all you got to show. People gonna do that to you. And some people, ladies and gentlemen, they stop. Because they don't see instant results. It doesn't happen quickly. They stop. Oh, no. You got to keep on watering your dream. That is not going to happen as quickly as you want it to happen. A lot of things are going to happen that will catch you off guard. And so therefore you've got to deal with and handle it as it comes. And not only that, but that faith and patience drives you into action. You've got to keep moving and keep plugging away. See, during those hard times, we didn't know how you're going to make payroll. During those times when you failed and things didn't work out, they were nowhere to be found. But you know what I discovered? When you're working at your dream, somebody said the harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. Oh, it's sweet to you. It's good to you. Why? See, when it's hard and there's a struggle, see, what you become in the process is more important than the dream. That's far more important. The kind of person you become, the character that you build, the courage that you develop, the faith that you're manifesting. Oh, it's something that you get up in the morning, you look yourself in the mirror, you're a different kind of person. You walk with a different kind of spirit. And people know that you know what life is, that you have embraced life. You knew it was hard, but you did it hard.
Okay, so might have been a little cheesy, I admit, but I really like that video. I didn't know, and I don't even want to know if it's true that a bamboo tree takes 5 years and then in 5 weeks. I don't even want to know if that's true at this point. But I think the analogy is great, especially when it comes to starting a small business, because like you said, you may have been working on this as your dream for 5 years and you've got nothing to show for it yet. Maybe today was that first step, but I want you to know the SBDC is available as a resource. We're also a cheerleader. We're not here to discourage you. We're here to help you through the process. Now, we may challenge some assumptions if that's in your best interest. We may say, well, let's look at those revenue figures again, because that seems very optimistic. But we are here to support you throughout the process, and not just until you get started, but even after you're started. And if you need any assistance, we're available as well. Thank you all very much for your time today. I appreciate your attendance. I'm trying to get you back out of here on a Friday afternoon before 1 o'clock. There will be a replay available for the video, so you will receive one more email that has a replay link. So if there's something you missed, or if you want to go back and watch it for some reason, you can do that. And again, thank you all very much. Appreciate having you here, and wish you all the best. Thanks.